You're watching Reason and Theology Live, a show dedicated to charitable discussions, debates, interviews, commentary, and analysis. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
Welcome back, everybody. Your host, Michael, on a Friday afternoon, doing a quick one here. And going to be taking questions early, so y'all can go ahead and put some in the chat at Reason and Theology. I just wanted to offer some very brief thoughts on what I'm hearing called TLM Onlyism, or TLM Only. You know, recently there's been a lot of talk about how there might be some modifications to Summorum Pontificum and, speculation on what that's going to look like. And some are suggesting that, well, what's going to happen is Pope Francis might not take away any of the Latin masses that are currently being celebrated. He might not restrict them, but what he might require is for people to effectively celebrate also the Novus Ordo in addition to the Latin Mass. So in other words, those Latin Mass communities that are out there celebrating the Tridency Mass would also need to offer the Novus Ordo Mass. Some are suggesting that's what is the case. And they're saying it's targeted against TLM Onlyism, which is the idea that the Latin Mass, should only be celebrated. And those who maintain it are TLM Onlyismers. I don't know how you would say that. There are people who maintain TLM Onlyism, I guess is how we would properly put it. So I thought, you know what, this is something we need to talk about. Let's consider this for the moment. If Pope Francis says, you know what, y'all who are offering the Latin Mass, you are required to also say the Novus Ordo. Is that a bad thing? Some are really up in arms about it because they maintain this TLM Onlyism, sola TLM, whatever you want to call it, position. And they're saying this is a horrible thing. I actually think that's a good idea. You want to know why? Why is it a good idea to require every priest who celebrates the Tridency Mass to also celebrate the Novus Ordo reverently, done properly? Absolutely. Done in continuity with tradition? Absolutely. But why do I think that we need to have that position? And why do I think it wouldn't actually be a bad idea if Pope Francis requires that? Why do I actually think it should be required? Well, if you are maintaining TLM only, it's evident that there is a schismatic mentality at play. That's the problem. So to require somebody who celebrates the Latin Mass to also celebrate the Novus Ordo done properly is to ensure that there is no schismatic mentality there. And those who would refuse to celebrate the Novus Ordo done properly, it's going to show that schismatic mentality. It's going to come out to the front. Why do I say schismatic? Because again, the Pope does have the authority to determine matters of liturgy, discipline, governance, as we discussed yesterday from Van Noort, who is, working with effectively Vatican I, to say, I'm not going to do what the Holy Father asked me to do here, is going to show disobedience and imply schism. It's effectively saying the Pope does not have authority over me in this area, when in fact he does. Now, the Pope does not have authority over anybody when it comes to violating something that God has prescribed. So, for example, if God says you are not to steal, but the Pope tells you you have to steal or you're excommunicated, you don't go with the Pope. There's a higher law at play there. So I understand that principle. But when it comes to the Novus Ordo, there isn't a higher law at play. That's the problem. because this is within the jurisdiction of the Pope. So there is no higher law saying, no, you're not to celebrate the Novus Ordo. Again, done properly. I'm not saying done with abuses and all that. Yeah, at that point, you would have an issue, and you would have a point to say, no, there's a higher law here. But there's nothing about the Novus Ordo objectively done properly that is evil or is in violation of God's law. And if you maintain that position, it's evident you are already effectively, materially at the very least, a schismatic. And there is some material heresy at play as well, because you would be denying one canon from the First Vatican Council, which we discussed yesterday. You would implicitly be denying it. So there would at least be some material heresy there, and material schism. That's my problem with TLM Onlyism, which is sad that that's actually a thing. That doesn't mean that you can't think that the Latin Mass is generally done better. That doesn't mean that you can't think that the Latin Mass is more prayerful for you. That doesn't mean that you can't prefer the Latin Mass. I'm not saying any of that. But to say, I will not celebrate it when the Pope requires you to, that's another problem. That's now an issue. Now, if you have the option of, well, you can celebrate one or the other, and you choose to celebrate only the Latin Mass, it's fine. But if the Pope says you need to also celebrate the Novus Ordo, you would be required to. And if you're refusing to, that's going to then show us who are the problematic traditionalists out there. Not that the traditionalists are the ultimate problem in the church right now. The ultimate problem are the liberals. The ultimate problem is the clergy and the bishops who are not disciplining the liberals in their diocese. They're ultimately the problem. I think a lot of the problems go back to the Pope himself. He has a lot of power and a lot of authority, and he's not using it well in some cases. So ultimately, the source of the problem is Pope Francis and, quite a few bishops out there. So I'm not saying that some of these radical traditionalists who would maintain this obstinate position are the ultimate problem. No, they're a symptom of the problem, but they're still a problem. And I do think that we need to know who they are and be able to identify them. And this is one way to be able to identify them. At the same time, if Pope Francis is going to do that, if he's trying to find out who are the dissenters, well, he also needs to do that with the liberals. Let's just be fair. I want to be fair to some of these radical traditionalists. If they're going to be called out for dissenting, they also need to do the same thing for the Father James Martins and the other dissenters there. You need to be consistent. If you're going to call out dissenters in the radical traditional circles, you also need to call out the dissenters in the liberal circles, because there's a whole lot more of them anyway. So don't get me wrong. I don't think that we should just say, oh, well, we need to find out who these material schismatics are, who are a problem in the traditional circles, and just leave it at that. No, we need to find out who the dissenters are, period. Whether they are conservative, liberal, Latin Mass goers, Novus Ordo goers. I don't care who they are. If they're a dissenter, we need to know who they are. So that's my thoughts here. And, there have been some comments about the diocese. I think it was the Diocese of Dijon or something like that. I forget. We spoke about it a little bit yesterday, but there was a bishop who effectively expelled the FSSP from his community, not because he's against the Latin Mass. He's going to continue to have the Latin Mass, but because some of those clergy would not celebrate the Novus Ordo with him when it comes to certain masses, chrism masses, effectively. I think that is a problem. I actually have no problem with him saying that, you don't need to be in this community. And by the way, before I continue that, Ortho Christo says, Michael, I'm saying this with respect. I believe Francis will do nothing about the liberals because he's clearly on their side. I agree with you. I don't think he's going to do anything about the liberals. I think that he will do something about some radical traditionalists, but he's not going to do anything about the liberals. I agree with you. I do think that he's more on their side, and that's the problem. That doesn't mean that it's okay to now be a radical traditionalist who is dissenting from the papacy and not showing proper obedience whenever it's due, right? It doesn't follow just because, well, just because my brothers and sisters, they're not obeying mom and dad, well, I guess I can disobey mom and dad, right? Or just because my friends are breaking the law, I guess I can break the law too, right? No. Well, my mom and dad aren't doing anything to my brothers and sisters, so it must be okay for me to do it. Or the law isn't doing anything to my friends, so I guess I can break the law. Doesn't logically follow, right? I mean, we're supposed to be obedient whether or not, our superiors are doing what they're supposed to be doing or not. But I agree with you. That's why I'm saying if he's going to be consistent, however, he needs to do the same thing for the liberals. And in fact, I would think that they're the bigger problem, right? Um, I don't focus a whole lot on, critiquing liberals just because I think they're unreachable, and I don't think that, um, it's going to do a whole lot of good. But if I were a bishop, oh, you better believe that's the group I'm going after first. Because if you actually have the power to do something about it, you need to go to the root problem first, and then we can talk about reactionaries and then reactions to the problem. Radical traditionalists, they're reactionaries. They are a reaction to the problem. They're a symptom of the problem. They're not the root cause. It's liberals and them not being disciplined that is the problem. Them getting away with all kinds of liturgical abuses and heresies and what have you. So, but back to what I was saying about the Latin Mass. If you have a priest in your diocese who will not celebrate the Novus Ordo with you, they refuse to concelebrate, there's a problem there. There's a schismatic mentality there. You won't celebrate the Mass, this particular Mass, with your bishop. Now, I'm sure they would celebrate a Latin Mass with the bishop, right? But so they wouldn't be refusing to celebrate with the bishop altogether, but they would refuse to celebrate the ordinary form with their bishop. That's still a schismatic mentality, because it's effectively saying that, you know what, objectively speaking, this Novus Ordo is against God's law. And you're in communion with this bishop? Wait, you're in communion. You share an altar with this bishop that is celebrating a liturgy that is objectively offensive to God, and you're in communion with him. You don't see a problem there? That's an issue. For you to remain in communion with him is a major problem. Why would you still remain in communion with a body that has objectively a liturgy that is offensive to God? Help me out here. Help me understand how this works when it comes to ecclesiology. That's odd. That doesn't mean that your bishop could not abuse the liturgy, right? And you might still be in communion with him. But you're actually in communion with somebody that you think has a liturgy that is objectively offensive to God. You might want to reconsider whether or not you're in the right church at that point. So I have no problem with a bishop saying, no, you guys need to get out of my diocese if you're not going to concelebrate the Novus Ordo with me. I think that's actually the right decision, because it's showing that there's a schismatic mentality there. To die on that hill and to refuse to celebrate the Mass with your bishop is problematic. There's nothing objectively wrong with concelebration, moreover. That's pretty normal. And our Eastern Rite churches do that. And that's definitely been part of our tradition. What's novel is low Mass. That's novel. What's novel is not giving communion to infants. What's novel is communion under one kind. What's novel is communion on the tongue, and so on and so forth. Now, those all might be good things, all right? But they're still novel, as I've noted. Concelebration in and of itself is not anything novel, and there's nothing wrong with it. So one shouldn't reject to celebrate the Novus Ordo with their bishop on grounds that there's concelebration. Okay, well, we can't do that. So, all right, well, on what grounds are you going to reject to celebrate the Mass with him? Well, I mean, the only other answer I could think of is that you believe the Novus Ordo is objectively offensive to God. And if you believe the Novus Ordo is objectively offensive to God, because I can think of really no other reason why you would deny to celebrate this Mass with your bishop, you might be in the wrong church, because now you're in a church that can implement liturgies that are objectively speaking offensive to God. It's no longer indefectible. According to the standards of tradition, according to our manualists, according to Vatican I, it's no longer indefectible. Your church has been invalidated. You're in the wrong place. By the way, see the super chat there, KG. I appreciate that. So maybe there's another option out there. Maybe there's another reason why this particular group doesn't want to celebrate the Novus Ordo, and maybe it doesn't. It isn't the case that they just think that the Novus Ordo is objectively sinful. Maybe there's some other reason. Perhaps. I'm willing to hear it out. I'm just saying hypothetically, if the case is that they think that the Novus Ordo is objectively offensive to God, then yes, I could completely understand saying, I don't want you in the diocese anymore. On that same basis, can we do the same for the liberals? Because it's odd to go after dissenting conservatives, but not go after dissenting liberals. I'm just saying we got to be consistent. Don't just go after some traditionalists who are in dissent. Also go after the liberals, because frankly, they're the bigger problem right now. What is con-celebration? When you have multiple priests celebrating together. And that's what's done at these chrism masses, right? Where the bishop makes the chrism that's going to be used in his diocese. And the rest of the clergy are supposed to come together, and it shows the fact that they're one community. And don't forget, the priest is to be under the bishop. I mean, go and read John of Antioch. The priest is to be under the bishop. He is not some rogue solo guy out there, right? His task is to be the bishop in that local parish, since the bishop can't be there that Sunday. He's to be an extension of the bishop. He's to do what the bishop says to do, unless it's offensive to God, right? And the Novus Ordo is not offensive to God, objectively speaking. I'm sure some abuses of it might be, for sure. Now, let's see. I want to go to a few of these chat questions. Sethi asks, could a priest take a stance that they refuse to con-celebrate any mass that contains liturgical abuse? Would this still be schismatic in your mind? I can understand that a little bit more. And maybe if this particular group is saying, well, I think that there's going to be liturgical abuse at this mass, I could maybe understand that objection. It's not necessarily schismatic, but I would say, what kind of abuse are we talking about? I mean, there are degrees of liturgical abuse. I hope we all recognize that. None of it is good. We shouldn't have any of it, but there are degrees of liturgical abuse. There is a certain extent that, okay, well, there's a little bit of abuse here, but it's of a kind that is still within the realm that you could morally still participate in. And then there's an extent of it that no, you can't even morally participate in it. A gay mass, for example, a clown mass, for example. If your bishop tells you to come con-celebrate at a gay mass, now that's different, because now we're not saying I'm refusing to do something that my bishop is asking me to do, period, that is objectively good. You're now saying I'm refusing to do something that is objectively against a higher law. I totally get that at that point. But simply con-celebrating the Novus Ordo with your bishop, and it's not a Latin, it's not a clown mass, and it's not a gay mass. Okay, well, that's not the same thing as being asked to go and celebrate at a gay mass, right? There's nothing wrong about the Novus Ordo that's against a higher law. But if you're saying, well, there's other abuses that are going on there, they're not gay masses, they're not clown masses, but there's other abuses. Okay, well, what are they? Communion in the hand? Is that what we're saying? That's not a reason to not celebrate with your bishop. That's not a good enough reason, because there's nothing in and of itself objectively wrong with communion in the hand. So, well, it could be that some particles fall on the floor. Okay, so let me ask you this. If there are some kind of abuses that go on at the Latin Mass where maybe some particles somehow, are coughed out of one's mouth and fall on the floor, am I not to go to that Mass either because there's some abuse going on, or they don't use a patent or something? I mean, I don't know. We can just start making some things up and start pointing to some kind of abuse that's taking place. Does that mean that I shouldn't go to a Latin Mass? No, there are some abuses that, though I don't condone, I'm not going to say prevents me from going to the Mass altogether, or would prevent a priest from participating in the Mass altogether. There would be some examples and there would not be some scenarios. So we would have to say, okay, well, what exactly are their concerns? I mean, what exactly are they expecting to happen at this Novus Ordo Chrism Mass that they feel that they can't in good conscience participate in? We would have to talk the specifics. And just from what I've heard, I haven't heard any specifics. So let me know if you've heard some more details. I'm not so much speaking about this particular community in that particular situation. I bring it up as kind of as a point of discussion. I don't know all of the details with that particular community, with this bishop and the FSSP and all that. I don't know all the details. I'm just saying, objectively speaking, if this is what happened, if they're just refusing to participate in a Novus Ordo Mass with their bishop because they think the Novus Ordo is objectively wrong, that's what I'm saying is now wrong. And that ties into the Latin Mass onlyism discussion that we're having. If there are other reasons why those FSSP priests are not wanting to celebrate, then we need to discuss those details, right? Let's see. I think I saw a super chat there. Appreciate the super chat. The Novus Ordo is rarely done properly. They should fix that before requiring Latin Mass churches to offer the Novus Ordo. Well, you know what? I think that even the Latin Mass isn't done properly in some cases. But I understand the difference. There's definitely a big difference between Novus Ordo and the Latin Mass when it comes to not being done properly. I completely agree that generally there's going to be more of that with the Novus Ordo than the Latin Mass. Okay, but I understand there might still be some things that are not done properly, but are they enough to exclude you from being part of that Mass? Sorry. I understand that. I get that. I completely understand. But we would have to discuss, okay, what is not being done properly that you would be able to say, okay, well, I don't think I could in good conscience participate in this when my bishop is requiring me to. If you're talking about communion in the hand, like I said, that's not good enough. If you're talking about versus populum, like I said, that's not good enough. I might agree. In fact, I do. Ad orientem should be the only way we do things. I might agree, and in fact, I do, that communion on the tongue is the preferred method right now in our Latin Rite churches. I might agree with all of those details, but I'm not going to say that that now prevents you from being part of that Mass. Yet, I do realize there are some things that would eventually meet that criteria, like gay masses, right? Because now you're condoning something that's objectively evil and sinful and contrary to what we teach. I get that. The communion done in the hand's not doing that. Versus populum is not doing that. Even women altar servers. I don't think that there should be any women altar servers. I see no good reason for it. First of all, we need to have subdeacons doing all of this stuff anyway. And then second of all, if we don't have subdeacons, it needs to be a male. just historically, our tradition has been that women would generally not participate at the altar, even when we had female deacons in the Latin rite. If they were to preach a homily or something, which happened before, that was generally seen as an abuse, not as part of our tradition. Um, I don't see a good reason why you would ever have female altar service. I don't see any reason for it. So I think that's wrong. But as wrong as I may think it is, that is not in and of itself enough to just say I can't participate in this mass at all, objectively, right? It's not good enough. It has to be in violation of God's law, of a higher command. There's no violation here going on. It is actually within the law, and the Pope does have that authority to say that, okay, it's permitted. I don't think that he should have. I think that that was not the right decision, but it's not objectively sinful and evil. I just don't think it's the best idea. And I don't think it's I think it's novel. It's not preserving our small t tradition as well as I think we should. But ultimately it's up to the Pope to determine those things. Paul the Sixth says, I mean, it's up to the Pope to determine which traditions are the ones that have to be preserved, because there's a million different traditions out there. It's up to the Pope and the magisterium to determine that. And they've determined otherwise. So, okay. I might personally think this is a particular thing that I would have gone a different direction with, but at the end of the day, I know the Pope has that authority to allow for women altar servers. And so in and of itself, objectively speaking, it's not something that you couldn't go to a mass where they're there. But if I have the option between one mass with altar servers that are female and one mass without, I'm going to go to the one without. But if I only have the option of one with female altar servers, I'm going to go to it. So I don't see that as being a reason to not celebrate with your bishop. And for you to not celebrate with your bishop, again, is a sign that you're not in communion with your bishop. There's a problem there. To celebrate with your bishop is to show that you're in communion with him, that you're under his authority, which you're supposed to be as a priest. Now, I understand they're part of a society that's within his diocese, and that, but still, you're in his diocese. There should be some concelebration there. There should be some communion. Do guitars in a Novus Ordo make it a clown mass? No, but I don't think that they are suited here in the West, in the Latin Rite. I don't think that they're fitting for a liturgy. I don't think it's fitting. Maybe some parts of the world that's considered fitting and reverent, but not here in America. That's for sure. Guitars aren't considered reverent. I'm not saying objectively they're wrong, but again, in America, they're not considered something reverent. So, and like I said, those things have been subjective. Having any instruments during the liturgy was offensive to many church fathers, actually. Okay. I've been to multiple parishes that celebrate the Novus Ordo, and they had no clapping signs. Actually, that's good. I'm glad they had that, because they'll do the clapping with without those signs in many cases. Now, I agree with Benedict XVI here on the issue of clapping. I don't think it's appropriate during the Mass, but it's not something that, okay, well, I can't attend that liturgy because of it, right? And some people are going that scrupulous. They're taking things to that level of scrupulosity that I can't attend if there's a women altar service. I can't attend if there's clapping during the Mass. Again, those things might not be the best thing, but they're not objectively evil either. Let's just think about this. You generally sit during some parts of the Mass, right? Well, the majority of Christians generally didn't sit during Mass. They would have found that extremely offensive. Just as offensive as you might find clapping in the liturgy, they would find it offensive that you sit in a pew during the liturgy. They would have said, no, you need to be standing up. What are you doing sitting? They would consider that offensive. Looking through the comments and questions here. I'm looking. Somebody was saying that they think the Latin Mass is going away. This freaked me out big time. No, it's not going away. But let's just say, let's just pretend for the moment, like I said on yesterday's stream, that the Pope completely just says we're no longer going to use the extraordinary form, and you can only use the ordinary form. That is within his power, according to Vatican I. It doesn't mean it's the most prudent thing to do. I understand that it might be imprudent, but he does have that authority and power to require that. But let's be honest, it's not going to come to that. Pope Francis isn't going to do that. He's not just going to exclude the extraordinary form outright, no qualifications, period. That's not happening. Do you think that the bishops should and can force Novus Ordo priests to say the Latin Mass? Yes, they can. Should they? Personally, I think that every Novus Ordo priest needs to say also the Latin Mass. But I recognize the problem is more on the end of the Latin Mass priests with not celebrating the Novus Ordo. But then again, I take that back. I think actually there's probably going to be a whole lot of Novus Ordo priests who would refuse to say the Latin Mass. Now that I think about it, yeah. I mean, if we're going to be consistent, I think that that's the case for sure. And if you're a priest who says, I won't say it because I think that the extraordinary form is objectively evil or sinful or something like that, then you have that same problem as the Latin Mass priest. So yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. We don't need to just go after the dissenting radical traditionalists. We need to, and when I say by we, I mean the bishops, right? They don't need to just go after dissenting radical traditionalists. They need to do that with the liberals, because I bet there's quite a few who would see the extraordinary form as something that is schismatic. They would see it as something that is evil. And that's a problem too. You can't call a liturgy that the church used for a very long time evil. You can't do that. And if you're one of those Novus Ordo priests who thinks that, I'm just so glad that Vatican II happened, because prior to that, the church was just failing in its mission. It was just evil. It was just, its liturgies was offensive to God. If you really believe that, you're also in the wrong church. You're in the wrong church, and you're also lying to yourself. God did not have the Latin Rite celebrating a mass that was objectively offensive to him. Even though I understand there were a lot of novelties going on in the Latin Mass. Even though there are some things in the Latin Mass that might not be ideal. Even though there were some priests who were doing the Latin Mass, in a way that was liturgically abusive. I get that. I understand that. But objectively speaking, there's nothing wrong or evil with the extraordinary form. There's nothing wrong with it. This is, you can't say that the church for all of these years has been just engaging in sin until Vatican II, or 1969 to be specific. You can't take that kind of position for any more of a reason than a Latin Mass priest could say that the Novus Ordo is offensive to God. You can't take either one of those positions. So, I mean, should maybe the bishop require them to say the Latin Mass? Yeah, you may have a point. Maybe you should, because I think that you'd probably find a lot of dissenters there among the Novus Ordo priests who would refuse to do it, and that's a problem. That's an issue. If you can't say the Mass in the way that your ancestors said it, and I know all of your ancestors didn't say it, but I'm just saying in the way that quite a few of your ancestors said it, you also have a problem. So, I mean, hey, look, if I were a bishop, I would have people doing both forms. Every parish would be doing both forms, period. And you dissent on either side, I don't want you in the diocese. But that's me, and I'm not a bishop, and I never will be. So And that's why I would never be. Even if I were eligible to be a bishop, they would never pick somebody like that. They pick people who generally tend to be, not all, I understand there are some exceptions, but they generally tend to pick people who will follow suit. And I'm not that one. Obviously, I'm going to stay within the confines of what I'm supposed to be obedient to. But what I mean here by follow suit is somebody who won't rock the boat. And that's not me. I will rock the boat. That's the way I've always been. I'm that guy. I'm that guy who will make a scene. Tyler K. Could you imagine an Orthodox priest telling his bishop, "Sorry, Your Eminence, I find the way you celebrate liturgy to be gravely sinful, and I won't participate." He's suspended, or he'd be suspended or defrocked. Speaking of which, they were showing me how that mass, that Anglican parish that Elpidophoros, I guess is how you say him, right? Archbishop of America, Greek Orthodox Archbishop of America, where he recently celebrated at an Anglican parish. It's this gay, parish, gay transgender promoting parish, big time into promoting gay content and transgender content. I thought that was interesting. Thank you for the soup chat, by the way. Can Roman Catholicism still have antipopes? I mean, an antipope is always a possibility, sure. Likewise, so is universal and peaceful acceptance. Got to check that one out. All right, I got to go here in just a second, y'all. Let me see if I can find one more. If what you're saying about the news is right, then on the bright side, we will have more reverently celebrated Novus Ordo masses by the TLM communities. Yeah. Look, I'm not even saying that that's the case. I'm saying that other people are speculating that this is what the Pope's going to do. And I'm just saying, if that is the case, this is no reason to panic like they're doing. It's not a reason to panic. It's actually a good thing. And that's one of the reasons why is, it'll actually show that the Novus Ordo can be done right. And it's also going to show over time, 100 years where you have the two masses being said side by side like that, they're going to organically impact each other. With or without directives from the Vatican, they're going to impact each other. And within time, that will organically become a solid mass, in my opinion. I think that you would have a uniting, a meeting of the two, and we would once again have restored one form in the Roman Rite. Over time, that would happen slowly and surely. So I actually think it would be a good idea. All right. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed this. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And also check us out, patreon.com/reason and theology. It's the website there, scrolling at the bottom over there. Check it out if you want to support us and also get access to extra content we recently posted. In fact, yesterday, some thoughts reviewing the James Locutus, Dr. Locutus, Ubi Petrus papacy debate. So if y'all want to check that out, it's on there. It has me, Elijah, William, and Eric on. All right. Till next time. God bless you all.